Hello, everyone. It's Helen, the Crimson Cadaverous. I wanted to come on and make a video about the January astrological energy. I understand most people have already probably made some videos about January, before the 1st or on the 1st, but I kind of wanted to let the year settle in a little bit before I started making a video about it. But I definitely wanted to talk about this energy because we have a lot of very shifting, um, revolutionary energy that is coming in this month. So we have Aquarius season beginning January 20th, which is going to coincide with the Pluto Cazimi. So basically, Pluto and the Sun are going to conjunct and then both move into Aquarius. So we're going to talk about that. But we also have a lot of other Aquarian Uranus energy that we need to talk about this month. It looks like actually Mercury and Uranus and Pluto are going to be the ones that we're going to talk about the most. But I'm going to pull up some charts to give you guys a visual about things. But first and foremost, the thing I wanted to talk about is at the very first of the year, on January 1st, we had Mercury station direct. And definitely made it feel like it actually was the new year. I generally don't celebrate the new year on January 1st. I celebrate the astrological new year, which is the spring equinox. But it definitely made it feel like this was, actually starting something new because we had Mercury that had been retrograde for the last part of the year and, station direct January 1st. But this is actually still significant because even when a planet stations direct, they have a shadow period after, coming out of their retrograde phase. So for Mercury, they will come out of their shadow phase on January 20th, which is interesting because this is the same day that we have Pluto and the Sun moving into Aquarius. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's important to keep in mind because Mercury is actually connected to Uranus. So Uranus is actually the higher octave of Mercury. So Mercury is the planet of communication, technology. That's why when people talk about like Mercury retrograde and, things going wrong technologically, that's, where that comes from. Mercury represents the mind. But when we think about Uranus, Uranus is the higher octave of the mind. So Mercury is, the practical mind. So the things like, 2 plus 2 is 4, the things we know, the things that are tangible in our mind. But Uranus asks us to go higher. He asks us to be awakened. He asks us to consider things that we haven't considered before, consider doing things differently than we've done them before. He brings in revelations. He brings in change. So it's important to think about like those two together. So obviously, again, like Mercury is the tangible mind and Uranus is the higher octave. Both actually speak to technology, although again, Uranus is going to speak to technology that we're innovating. So like new technologies coming in, new things. So it's interesting that they're both, they have a lot going on with each other kind of this month, and we'll talk about that. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'm actually going to turn this around so that you can see the chart. The first thing that I wanted to talk about right now, I have the chart pulled up for January 11th, which is the day that we have the Capricorn new moon. So while we're still in Capricorn season before January 20th, we are of course in, Aquarius season. Before we have Aquarius season on January 20th, we have Capricorn season currently. And when the sun and the moon form a conjunction, as we have here, that's when we have the new moon. So that occurs, like I said, on January 11th at 5:57 a.m. Central Time. So all the times that I'm using here are going to be Central Time because I'm here in New Orleans, and that is the time that we use. And it's a really, Capricorn new moons are always a great time to set intentions, whether, it happens to fall in December or happens to fall in January. It's always a really great time to set intentions because Capricorn is, the boss of the zodiac. Capricorn is, all about business and like getting things done. And it's a earth sign, so it's a very grounded energy, very pragmatic. So if we're setting new intentions for things, that we want to do forward, that's a great energy to be using. So this is already like a great energy to be setting new intentions with. But we also have some interesting energy that's going on around that time. So we have Mars over here forming a trine with Jupiter over here. And that is a really great energy to complement this new moon, because Mars is our power planet and Jupiter is our faith and our luck. So if those are trining, so a trine is a harmonious alignment. So it's 120 degrees away. It's in the same element. So like both, in this case, Capricorn and Taurus are earth elements. So again, grounded energy to work with. Mars is our power planet and Jupiter is our luck. So essentially those two energies are flowing harmoniously to one another during this new moon. So to me, I read that as we have the power to make our own luck. And that is beautiful for a Capricorn new moon, because Capricorn is always going to take charge and be like, all right, I'm going to make this work for me. I'm going to do my business. I'm going to make this work. So, also we have Mercury entering Capricorn 2 days later. So January 11th, we've got the new moon, and then January 12th is actually when we have the exact Mars trine Jupiter, and then January 13th is when we have Mercury enter Capricorn. So again, Mercury is the mind, keep that in mind. And so it's like Mercury has mind on business. So that's like a wonderful energy to kind of, again, complement that Capricorn new moon, because that energy, if our mind is on, it's in a Capricorn state of or framework, then, it's basically like we can focus on getting shit done, basically. So this is a really great energy to set some powerful intentions for the year. Obviously, again, I talked about how this to me isn't the beginning of the year, but we're always beginning things. We can definitely set some really powerful intentions during this time. But I think it's really important to remember that we are setting these intentions, but as we move through the lunar cycle, we're going to be adjusting those intentions. So don't, when you're setting your intentions and things like that, don't be so stuck on it has to be a certain way. It has to be, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And if this doesn't come through by the full moon, something's wrong. Because that's not necessarily going to be helpful to us. Especially because, like I said, as the month goes on, we've got some pretty, shifting energy going on with all that Aquarius, Uranus energy coming in. So set some powerful intentions, but also be flexible with them. Also, that day is the 111 portal. So that is some really powerful energy. Again, 1 represents the beginning of something. So it's really powerful energy for beginning things. So again, when we're setting intentions, it's because we want to begin something. The new moon is the beginning of a new lunar cycle. So it's really great energy for beginning something new. So we're going to talk about January 20th, because that is actually the day that to me is probably the most powerful of the month. I don't want to say the most powerful of the year, but one of the most powerful of the year. So this day is interesting because it is the day that we begin Aquarius season. So when the sun moves into Aquarius, that's when we begin Aquarius season. So as we see, sun's getting real close here. But it's also the day of the Pluto Cazimi. So Cazimi means in the heart of, and essentially when we talk about a Cazimi, that means a planet is forming a conjunction with the sun. So what's interesting is while they're both still in Capricorn, so Pluto is still in Capricorn here and the sun is still in Capricorn, they are going to form that conjunction. And it's going to be at 29 degrees, which that's the anaretic degree. The anaretic degree is a degree of mastery. It's a degree of completion. And, you know, with Pluto being a planet that moves signs not very frequently. So every like 10 to 20 years, Pluto's moving signs. So it's definitely very significant whenever Pluto moves into a different astrological sign. And I should say this isn't the first time that Pluto has moved into Aquarius. He actually did that back in March of last year. We had, I believe it was March 23rd of last year. We had a little bit of a dip through not quite even 3 months when Pluto went into Aquarius in March and then like dipped back into Capricorn in June when he was retrograde. And that's where he's been for the second half of the year of 2023. And so this is going to be the second time that Pluto's going to move into Aquarius. But I think this is a little bit more significant. Not that it wasn't already significant, him moving, you know, in the first place, but it's a little more significant because of this conjunction with the sun. And I think what is really happening, so Pluto is the great revealer. Pluto, you know, helps us transform on like a deep soul level. So he helps us dig into our big, deep, you know, dark truths that like maybe we have like kind of, you know, hidden from ourselves, maybe even our entire lifetime. And, you know, this is when we talk about like doing shadow work and things like that, like Pluto's attached to that. So he also is a generational planet. So a lot of times the things that Pluto's affecting, obviously affecting us individually, but also affecting society. So Pluto moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius, I'm sure, you know, if you follow astrology at all, everybody's been talking about it. The last time that Pluto was in Aquarius, besides back in March, obviously, was at the end of the 1700s. And this was, you know, the end of the American Revolution, the beginning of the French Revolution. This is the same time that Uranus was discovered. This is when the hot air balloon was invented. Like all these like crazy, you know, revolutionary and like innovative things were going on at this time. It was also just a time period of change. Like when you think about like using obviously the American Revolution and the French Revolution as an example, these have been like empires, you know, that obviously like, you know, United States was attached to England and then France was an empire. These were like huge empires that basically their entire societies were changing. We don't know how this is all going to play out this time. I don't necessarily think we're going to have, you know, another revolution, although I do, not necessarily a revolution like, you know, back then, but I do think of it as more of a revolution of the mind. I think we're going to see a lot more people awakening to, you know, just their higher selves and their connection to source, and just their connection to everything else. So, Aquarius is the humanitarian, you know, connected to society, basically. So, as we see Pluto and the sun form a conjunction and then both move into Aquarius on the same day, I think basically what's happening is the sun is kind of shining a light on all these like deep, dark secrets that we need to face as we move into the future. So again, this can come down to an individual level, or it can also come down to a societal level. We've already been seeing these things, you know, over the last few years, a lot of things coming out, you know, and a lot of people just kind of coming to realizations about where they're at, you know, like within society. So, and again, I mentioned that this was the day that Mercury leaves their shadow phase. So any kind of like fogginess that was, or confusion that was still left over from Mercury retrograde is basically clearing at that point. So it's like, to me, I just see this as like an energy of, I can see clearly now. You know, I have that song in my head right now. I can see clearly now. The rain is gone or whatever. And I just think that, we're moving into, people talk about the age of Aquarius. I feel like we're like continuously moving into that. And I think this is just like a big giant leap into the age of Aquarius and into just an awakened mindset that, has been kind of building for quite some time. There's a couple of other interesting things that are happening right around that time. Like the day before, we actually have Venus squaring Neptune and we have Mercury trining Jupiter. So let's see if I can show that on here. Let's see. Venus over here, squaring Neptune over here. And then we have Mercury forming a trine, of course, with Jupiter over here. So Venus, what's interesting is we were talking about like Mercury and then Uranus being the higher octave of Mercury. Well, same applies to Venus and Neptune. So Venus, talks about like love, but more of like a conditional type of love, like connected to our values. And Neptune is connected to unconditional love. So like connection to source, understanding that we're connected to like everything. So with Venus squaring Neptune, I feel like during this time period where we're already, like moving into a more innovative time, we're being challenged to consider love on a higher level. So, and love to me is more about our connection to everyone and everything rather than anything to do with like the romantic nature. And so I think there is definitely a challenge here to, have our hearts open and come from a place of love as we move into this age of Aquarius. And then also with Mercury trining Jupiter, so again, Mercury being the lower octave of Uranus, who's attached to Aquarius. Mercury, so our mind is trining Jupiter, so harmonious flow with luck. So it's almost like, kind of like we were talking about, like the Mars trining Jupiter before being like, the power to, make our own luck. This is almost more about the ability to think of ourselves in a faithful, lucky way. So again, I really feel like, we kind of have luck on our side as we're going into this. And if we enter into this time period with our hearts open, I think we're going to do fine. But I really feel like, once we move into Aquarius season with like Pluto there as well, we're really going to start feeling this Aquarian energy again, that we got a little bit of a preview of it back in March of last year. Now, this is not going to be the last time that Pluto moves into Aquarius. He's going to have a retrograde starting, I believe, May. Hold on, I gotta look at my notes now. He goes retrograde May 2nd and then ends up moving back into Capricorn in September. So he'll have a little bit more of a dip back into that, 29th degree of Capricorn, still finishing up a little bit of the work that we need to do there. And we'll finally go into Aquarius for, the final time for the next like 20 years, because he's going to be in Aquarius until 2044. That is going to happen on November 19th. So this isn't, like I said, this isn't the last time that we're going to have Pluto moving into Aquarius, but this to me is very significant just because of that conjunction with the sun. So next we want to talk about one thing very briefly. Right after that Pluto Cazimi, we have Venus moving into Capricorn. So obviously, we're kind of leaving a lot of the Capricorn energy behind, with like Pluto and the sun moving into Aquarius. But I think this is really nice timing because, again, Venus is our value system and Capricorn is very pragmatic and very businesslike. So it's almost like we're getting very clear on our values as we're moving into this Aquarian age. So I definitely think that's a significant thing. But then we have this beautiful full moon with the moon in Leo on January 25th. And this to me is like, I still feel like this plays into the Aquarian energy because, of course, the other end of the axis of Leo is Aquarius. So the Leo full moon is still going to be, happening during Aquarius season and hitting on a lot of that Aquarian energy. So whenever we have a full moon, obviously the moon is opposite the sun. And so it's like they're looking across at each other. So obviously in opposition, sometimes when we think about that word, it can have negative connotations. But I always like to think about an opposition as just the ability to look across at an opposing viewpoint. So obviously with Aquarius, it's very, societally based, like, focusing more on society and, the whole versus like the individual. And Leo, although Leo is kind of known for being, very individualistic, I kind of still think of it as, a collective sign because Leo represents the heart. And I feel like, if we move from the heart, we actually can feel ourselves connected to the whole. So I definitely feel like with this full moon, there is a lot of opportunity for us to connect to the whole, connect to society, connect to source, connect to just absolutely everything in the universe. And we have this really interesting T-square going on because, of course, Jupiter over here in Taurus is going to be squaring the sun, but also squaring the moon. So that's a T-square. And a T-square is a configuration of particular challenge. Basically, getting challenges from both squares. Squares are always challenges. And, challenges are not necessarily a bad thing. They're the thing that, if we meet the challenge, we have the opportunity to level up. So with this particular situation, of course, because it's Jupiter, I never think anything's bad with Jupiter. Not that there's any bad transits, but things are always lightened up with Jupiter. And Jupiter is, also speaks to faith. And so to me, I see this as like the challenge is keeping the faith during this really intense time of a full moon, because the full moon is like, the full energy of the moon that we're receiving. Jupiter allows us to remain optimistic, see the bright side of things. So I think the challenge here is whatever is changing, whatever, things that we're experiencing, keep it light, keep the faith. I always say that also with like a T-square, we've got the square here. The best way of handling that energy is to think about this as a grand cross. So like a cross like this, but with missing energy. So it would be a grand cross if there was something over here in Scorpio. So when we think about that, like with the quote unquote missing energy, what we're wanting to think about is that energy basically being the way that we kind of like get through this tension of this T-square. So when we think about Scorpio speaks to mystery. Scorpio speaks to like the depths of our soul. So if we're thinking about how to counter all of this, obviously with Jupiter, keep the faith, but, embrace the mystery. Like, I think the thing that keeps coming through for me is I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think any of us really know what's going to happen. And so if we can enter into this time period embracing that mystery and, being here for it, I think it'll be a lot easier for us to keep the faith and connect, with our heart, with the Leo energy, and connect to humanity with that Aquarius energy. There's also one other thing that's going on at that same time, and that's going to be the sun squaring Jupiter. So we already talked about that, but that actually goes exact the next day, which I think that brings us some clarity around our faith. So this full moon, I really like this full moon. I'm a Leo sun, so I'm always going to like the Leo full moon, but this one definitely, I think this is going to bring us a lot of clarity around this new Aquarian energy that we have coming in. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is that 2 days later, so after the full moon, which is on January 25th, we have Uranus stationing direct. So Uranus is over here in Taurus, and he has been retrograde for several months, I think since back in August. And like we talked about, he is the higher octave of Mercury. He is attached to Aquarius energy. So I think that's definitely really significant, like less than a week after, we have this Pluto Cazimi, the sun and the Pluto moving into Aquarius, we have Aquarius's ruler, Uranus, stationing direct. So whenever a planet stations direct, it brings clarity to that area of our lives. So Uranus is actually, like I said, the higher octave of the mind, the awakened mind, revelations, our connection to society and the whole. But he's also the revolutionary. So I feel like when we talked about it at the very beginning of this video being kind of like a revolution of the mind this month, I think this is where that culminates. Where all of the things that have kind of been coming through, especially, around like January 20th, I think we're going to have some clarity about like where we want to fit in society during this Aquarian age. How do we want to revolt, I guess is the best way of saying it, because there is going to be quite a bit of revolution. Again, I don't necessarily think that revolution is even going to be really like fighting like a physical revolution. I think it's more, our minds changing, our minds awakening. So what's really interesting on that day is Mercury and Mars and Capricorn are forming a conjunction. So we already kind of talked about Mercury and Mars with their trines with Jupiter, but Mercury being the mind, Mars being our power planet, we have a very, very powerful mind on that day. So as we're getting this clarity from Uranus, we also have, essentially clarity from Mercury, who's also the next day trining Uranus. So Mercury forms a conjunction with Mars on the 27th and a trine with Uranus over here on the 28th. So again, that's a really harmonious energy, a trine. So the lower octave of the mind is flowing perfectly with the higher octave of the mind. So all of these, and as I just said that, it says 11:11 on the clock. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, so obviously very significant. But yeah, it's like we're having a revolution of the mind at this point. I guess that's the best way to say it. I'm going to turn the camera around. Okay, so we can probably be done looking at the charts, but I think the most important thing that I want to say about this is, with all this Aquarian energy coming in, that to me, Uranus and Aquarius are like the stars of this month. With all of that energy coming in, it's very exciting, it's very revolutionary, but it also signifies change. And I think, change and like upheaval. And I think we've already been experiencing that, for the last few years. Like, this is not a new thing. We should not be surprised by the fact that things are changing. But I think we're going to see it starting at like warp speed coming in at the end of this month. And, I, for one, did not come to this planet to, maintain the status quo. I came here to be a part of that revolution. I came here to help, awaken people and get us to a point where, I guess you would say we're actually like, a functioning whole as a society, which is definitely, when you really look around where we've been currently, over the last few hundred years, I would not necessarily say that, that has been the case. So this is definitely an opportunity for something new. And again, as I said, I didn't come here to maintain the status quo. And if, you're listening to this and this makes you a little uncomfortable, you're like, I just want things to stay the same. I want to maintain the status quo. This is going to be a rough time for you, because that's not where we're going. The only way to, move forward is progress, obviously. Like, we can't keep things the same. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like, we're moving forward. That's what we're doing. And like, in a way, we all kind of just need to be okay with that. Because there's a lot of like beautiful things that can come through if, we're open to the change that needs to happen. I think the problem is, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that would like us to either go back to the way things were, whatever that means, or, continue to maintain a status quo, keep things within a comfort zone. But for us to progress, we need to leave our comfort zones. And I know with our modern society, that is definitely a thing that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because we love our comfort zones. We love, like having our little bubbles where nothing changes and we can predict everything. But that's just not where we're at right now. And that doesn't actually further us in any way as a people. So I think that's something that, I would definitely suggest to anyone listening to this that is uncomfortable with the status quo changing, that you may want to sit with those feelings and figure out why you feel that way, why you feel you need to be in this comfort zone, why you feel you need to keep things the way that they are. Because again, nothing ever stays the way that it is. Everything always progresses one way or another. So, and that's definitely, I can't emphasize enough, everything that I look at in the energy for this month is definitely all about progress. So I think I'm actually going to leave it there, because I've talked for quite a bit. This is like a 32-minute video. So if you've stuck with me this whole time, thank you. If you have any questions about what I've said, definitely reach out to me. If you have any comments, definitely feel free to make them. Even if you want to tell me, this is crazy, I want to stay the same. Well, okay, whatever. But I definitely really want to, encourage everyone to be open to this Aquarius energy that's coming in, be open to the revolution of the mind, be open to just a certain level of humanitarianism that I think as a society we have not been open to recently. So again, if you have any questions, reach out to me, and I hope you enjoy the month of January. Bye-bye.